Volkswagen, the German car company who's been making cars for almost a century. And funny enough, one of the only car companies who didn't shuffle their feet, but rather took off at a sprint towards making EVs. I'll cover their actual business, so brands and price ranges, their financial performance, and some issues on the road ahead, and how they're maneuvering to deal with them too. This isn't financial advice. I'm doing my best to condense the annual report so you don't have to read it. Here's what they do in a sentence. They sell cars globally across all price ranges, but most of the sales come from Europe and China. There are a few vehicle segments, the first one being core. They use the Volkswagen logo or any of these, and it's for regular people like you and me. They have some lower priced ones, all the way up to maybe around mid-market. Over half of the vehicles VW sells is from this category. By the way, I won't be listing out all the cars. 30 new models were launched in 2024 alone, so I'm not going to waste your time like that, or mine. Then there is the Progressive brand group. That's just a name, no politics. This covers a little more luxurious cars. It ranges from sort of premium to top of the line. This is where 1/9 of the cars that they sell lie, and some of them are absolutely beautiful. Although you might notice that a certain brand isn't here. That's Porsche. They are so big they have their own separate category. VW owns 75% of them, and while they only sell 300,000 cars, they contribute over half of the revenues that the Progressive Group does. The last vehicle group is Stratton Commercial Vehicles. They make buses, trucks. Volkswagen owns 88% of them. The last real segment I'm going to cover is the financing, leasing, and insurance segment, because cars aren't usually bought for straight cash. Some of these are classified as business areas like the categories I mentioned, but I didn't include them above. There is the power engineering part. They make large bore industrial diesel engines, but they have been seeing demand for alternate fuels, and some of them do work with hydrogen. 3/4 of the revenues here are from marine systems and engines, and since this segment only makes a little above 1% of the total revenues, they're just not going to include it again for materiality reasons. Volkswagen likes to have everything vertically integrated, from procurement of raw materials all the way to the end. As the world is shifting to electric, they started a battery company. Unfortunately, the transition isn't happening as fast as they would like, but it's on its way, and in 2024 they sold 745,000 EVs. That is 26,000 units lower than last year, and if we're looking at Europe specifically, where 3.1 million cars were delivered, 400,000 of those were electric. So it's still a decent chunk, and luckily orders have gone up by 80% year over year. But as they innovate on batteries, drive down costs, and release some models in 2026 that they sound really excited about, that could change. And so they set up PowerCo. That's the in-house battery company to get the company ready for an eventual EV future. Currently, they have their regular electric platform and their premium platform electric that'll be for higher tier cars and will be tuned to represent each brand. Maybe a little more comfort on a Bentley and a little more sporty on a Lamborghini. Having shared bases will give them cost savings, and that seems to be their strategy. They have an in-house software team, but since they weren't exactly doing as good as they had hoped, they decided to cut back. To match the software and architecture of companies like Tesla and others in China, they decided to, you know what, let's just throw some money at the problem. They have Xpeng for the Chinese market and Rivian everywhere else. Similarly, they're gonna fine tune the look and feel of the software for each brand. A traditional car maker's strength isn't software, and as the world is changing, they're no longer looked at as that shining automaker on the hill. They have decent 2024 results, but they are starting to encounter some problems. But to be fair to them, while second only to Toyota, they do sell a whole lot of cars, and it's hard to grow at that scale. Total sales has basically remained flat. Again, to be fair, they did grow a lot since the pandemic, and have maintained these numbers this year, so it's not terrible. Zooming in, the core brand group did do well, they just simply sold more units, while the Progressive brand group did suffer. Thankfully though, their financing segment did step up. If we're shifting to operating income, it's volatile. Overall, a 15% decline. Stratton is the only real segment that had growth. We see contractions in Progressive because of stronger competition and restructuring costs. As for Porsche, simply less units sold and higher material costs. And if you've been paying attention to the news surrounding Volkswagen, you may have heard that they aren't doing so well in the Asia Pacific, specifically China, one of their biggest markets. Have you heard of BYD? Well, they are cooking the competition there. They're still expecting to lose share in 2025, but are going to start fighting for it in 2026 when they say they're going to release some new models that are a lot more competitive. This is in line with their for China in China strategy because it is super competitive and they need to be on their A game. So they're going to cut back on stuff like lead time and try to make their cars as best as they can. And thing is, BYD, even with some tariffs, enter the European market, so Volkswagen better be on their A game there too. I'll compare Volkswagen's stock performance to BYD, Tesla, and Ford. The two 100% EV companies have done well, but first of all, BYD is a lot newer, And Tesla's a meme stock. Volkswagen does unfortunately end up at the very bottom. Keep in mind they do pay dividends, as does the S&P and Ford. S&P and Ford, well, these guys are in the middle of the road. They have two types of shares: ordinary VOW shares, where you get one voting right, and there's also preferred shares. Those ones, no voting rights, but you get first priority when it comes to dividends. Also realize that 90% of ordinary shares, the ones that can actually vote, are controlled by three groups. There is the Porsche family, there is the state of Lower Saxony, and there is Qatar. This is their CEO. He's named Oliver Bloom, and he started in 2022 after the old CEO got fired because Cariad, their software thing, wasn't doing great, among other things. He has some big structural problems to face. For example, extra capacity. Now, they have solved that problem in the short term by coming to an agreement with labor unions to slowly reduce the headcount, but that came with a lot of backlash, and there are reports that it's only a short to medium term fix to the problem, and that there is still a giant long-term issue hanging over their heads. Another focus should be on the brand, which they do very well, I do have to say. Software, not so much, but remember, they did outsource that, but they just have to make sure they integrate it well. By the way, you can learn more about the deal with Rivian and Rivian, the actual company, if you just watch that video right over there. Then there's self-driving. They do have the basics with lane assist and have been working with many partners to do self-driving over the years. They are getting a chip from XPeng, which supposedly is fantastic for self-driving. We'll see though. Some societal trends that may hurt Volkswagen is that younger generations are getting their driver's licenses later and later. They have alternatives now. There's Uber, so just get the app, go somewhere else. There's also maybe robo-taxis, although that is a much longer term thing. We will see when that comes out. That could be in 20 years. We don't know. Actually, technically, they're already on the road, but when they become super popular, that's unclear. But it's not all doom and gloom though. They have entered the EV market pretty early, so they do have experience making these things. And it's slowly picking up. Not so much in North America, but in Europe and in China, yes, it is. And as Europe starts to rearm and they start spending a lot more money on the military, they could end up making vehicles for military purposes. They do need to keep their debt in check though, because it's getting quite high. Thankfully, interest rates are generally coming down, so that will ease the pressure just a little bit. If we look at their past unit sales over the long term, they did peak years ago, and they haven't gotten back to pre-pandemic levels. There are a lot more companies all over the world who make cars, so maybe they won't be able to export as many anymore. If we're going to take a look at their most recent results from Q1 2025, revenues are up, but operating incomes are unfortunately down. They are getting more orders outside of China that do make up for their declines there, but unfortunately, as the share of EVs rise, their margins do shrink. Because currently, EVs aren't as profitable as the gas cars. And so they're just getting pressured and all their margins are getting squeezed slowly. Their outlook for 2025, by the way, not including tariffs, because those are just absolutely unpredictable. They say they expect their revenues to grow by 5% and operating profit margins to be between 5.5% and 6.5%. For reference, full year 2024 figures were 5.9%, and first quarter of this year, that's 3.7%. So they're not on track, but hopefully they can make that up later on. That's Volkswagen, the legacy car maker who's been gearing up for the EV shift and for a fight on their home turf. Like, sub, and goodbye, people. Let me know what you guys want to see next, and if you think there's something I can improve on or something you guys want to see, let me know down below in the comments.